Good afternoon, everybody. This is Josh Pritchett, and we are on New Frontiers, a exploration of Star Trek: Strange New Worlds here on the Movers and Shakers Unlimited Network. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and thank you again for tuning in. Welcome all starships from the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. I will be joined shortly by Chris Pavone. Um,
Hi,
well, Chris, are
I
you
am
there?
here.
Here he is. Chris.
Um, uh,
Hey. Sorry I took the lead there, but
it's okay. I was waiting for the music. But bienvenidos a todos nuestros amados oyentes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for New Frontiers and Exploration of Strange New Worlds. Guten Tag, bonjour, Joss. The day has come. The one
mhm,
that was hinted at since the end of episode one.
yes.
The Gorn are here, and the episode was titled appropriately enough, Hegemony. And I want to go on record before we start off by saying I think this finale was up there with one of the best finales ever of any Trek series, right up there, elbow to elbow with Best of Both Worlds.
Indeed. I completely agree 100% with that. I mean, while I do think most of the title characters will probably survive next season, I'm going to be on pins and needles wondering how they're going to survive. And also, yeah, I mean, where does this lead? Is season three going to be the Gorn War, or what's going to happen? I mean, a lot is going on here. I just now rewatched the episode right before we went to air, and just so much cool stuff. I mean, we got introduced to Scotty. Isn't that amazing? It's just so
When
much to
we when
talk
we
about.
talk about the good, the bad, and the Gorn, one thing I will mention is how they took a page out of Marvel, and they kept the appearance of Scotty tightly under wraps. And I remember in the preview seeing Patel show up and say, "Oh, Kristen, you're here. You found us." And I remember thinking to myself, "Okay, they kind of cheated us here because I know there'd be a point at the start of the episode we're going to be wondering if Patel survived." But smoke and mirrors, folks, because we were so focused, at least some of us, on that we completely missed even the possibility that they might pull our Marvel and have a Scotty appear, taking a page from Civil War when all of a sudden we saw Giant Man in the fight at the airport.
Yes, I think that definitely the people working at Strange New Worlds have certainly learned a lot of lessons from the MCU as far as staging these things. So, without
To be
further ado, though, let's get more into that with the good, the bad, and the ironically named Gorn.
well, yes, well, first we need to do a recap
Yes,
of everything that happened, and I just want to say yes, these are they follow the example of the MCU people who definitely did not do Secret Invasion.
yes,
Um,
definitely.
So we start our episode with Christine, who is on Parnassus Prime, and she is helping Captain Patel and the Cayuga administer vaccines to the population there that resembles a quaint Middle Eastern, middle of the
Yes.
USA Earth, about probably 1980s, and they have not joined the Federation because they have concerns that joining the Federation will put a target on their backs. Little did they know. And Captain Patel's on the surface. Chapel beams up and sees talking to um, Pike when all of a sudden the interruption, their conversation goes dead. Comms goes down. They see a shuttle spiraling down, crash landing on the planet. And Patel looks at the closest ensign and says, "Get me the ship." And he doesn't respond. She's like, "Ensign." And she looks up, and we have a Gorn warship that is just coming underneath the clouds. And she's like, "Oh my God." And next thing we know, we're on the bridge of the Enterprise, and there's an SOS from Captain Patel. And she's saying, "We are under attack. It's the Gorn." And rightfully so, Pike looks at Ortega and says, like, "Get us there, everything you've got." And so they get there and they round the moon and they see the Cayuga, or shall we say, what was the Cayuga, because it has been completely ripped apart by the Gorn. And they can't scan for life forms because there is some kind of field that has gone up. And Laan says that this is Protocol 101 for Gorn invasions, that they dropped like a tower to prevent any beam outs or any communications from the surface of the planet they want to take over, because this is how they soften them up. And just then, Uhura gets a message from Starfleet, and Pike has already talked to Robert April. And Robert April has said, like, we got to be careful. We don't understand much about the Gorn hegemony. And Pike, channeling his inner Kirk, says, which is weird because he's usually the pacifist, he says, there's not much to understand here, Bob. They're monsters. And April replies, monsters is a term that others use when they don't understand us. And then Pike replies quickly, and sometimes a monster is just a monster, and I've seen them up close, and they are monsters. And so these monsters have sent a message to Starfleet, no words, just an image of a red line, a demarcation line that puts Parnassus on their side of the line and Enterprise and the Federation on the other side of the line. So they have drawn their proverbial line in space. And at this point, Pike says, okay, bridge team, ready room now. And he tells them, listen, I'm going after them to see if there's any survivors. You don't have to do this. I will ask for volunteers, but I'll do it myself if I need to. And of course, everyone says, like, I'll do this. Even Sam Kirk. And Lon says, are you sure you want to do this with a phaser? And he says, yeah, how better to learn how to kill him? And so now, how do they get down to the planet? Because a Gorn hunter ship has shown up, and they're pretty sure it's going to shoot at anything that tries to go down to the planet. And Ortegas has a brilliant idea, saying, hey, they're not sitting at the debris. What if we basically pretend to be debris and go down to the surface? And this is going to require an expert pilot, one of Ortega's caliber. And Ortegas is like, I'm not sure about them. They may not shoot at us. And Pike says, well, hey, Erica, haven't you been bugging me to go down on an away mission for months? And she's like, yeah, why have I been doing that? Scene changes, and you see the shuttle that's been covered in debris, and they're floating within range of the Gorn hunter ship. They make it past them, and then they're dropping precipitously to the surface. And here you see Ortegas, who's done this early in the season, that she drops under 1,500 feet and then manages to activate the engines, and because 1,500 is the magical number to stay out of sensor range, and she manages to fly them in close proximity to where the town was. And I say was because it is a smoking ruin. There is nothing there. It's just night, ruins, and blood everywhere. And they see in the distance what looks to be a green tower, and they speculate, and Land concludes this is what is keeping everyone from beaming out of what is essentially a hellhole now. And Joss, want to take us from there?
Through the remains of the town, they detect a Gorn youngling, which, as we saw in the episode last season, Gorn younglings are even more vicious than the adult Gorn. Point of reference here, if anybody's ever heard the story about why baby cobras are more dangerous than fully grown cobras, it's because baby cobras discharge more of their venom, supposedly. I'm never going to get close enough to find out. But getting back to the story, using the new phaser upgrades that Starfleet has sent them, they are able to kill the baby Gorn on one shot. Then they detect human life signs. So they go to investigate, and they go into this medical clinic, and Sam discovers some weird piece of equipment that seems to be giving off humanoid life signs. Suddenly, a force field drops down, trapping the crew, and somebody steps out of the shadows. It's a Starfleet officer in a red shirt, and he says, "Oh, you weren't supposed to get trapped in my Gorn trap!" And it is, of course, none other than our beloved old friend, Mr. Montgomery Scott. Of course, at this point, he's now Lieutenant Junior Grade Scott, from most recently from the starship Stardiver. After Scotty releases our heroes from the trap, he leads them to where the human survivors are. They are all holed up in a diner, where we find Captain Patel, the remaining members of her away team, and several survivors. Patel is initially very happy to see Chris, but then she's quite angry at him because he was far away from there. He was safe. Why did he have to come? And, you know, Chris knows that this is stress, and he says, "Hey, look, on your call." So they get Sky to begin explaining how he got there, and he explains that he was on a shuttle doing manual repairs to an observatory when the Gorn showed up. Apparently, we find out that the Gorn were attracted to the flares of a red supernova that Starfleet was observing. When the Gorn show up, they destroy the Stardiver. Scotty's able to get away, and he reveals that he developed a piece of equipment that would mask his shuttle to make it look like another Gorn ship. So back on the Enterprise, Spock and Uhura and Pelion come up with an idea where they could destroy the Gorn's masking technology, which is preventing beaming and communications, by sending the remaining section of the saucer section at the planet where the at the spot where the machine is. This is, of course, going to be very complicated because what they need to do is attach some retro rockets, and Spock is the only person with the physical ability to do this. Meanwhile, on the saucer section remains of the Cayuga, Chapel has awakened. She is coming around and manages to get the oxygen in sick bay back up and running. She then looks out the window and sees that the Enterprise is out there. Then she sees Spock floating by, and of course she tries to get his attention, but as we all know, sound does not travel very well in outer space. So she decides to put on a spacesuit and go find him. And when she goes to find him, she finds a Gorn attempting to access the Cayuga's main computer and download Starfleet's tactical codes. So she decides she's going to have to crawl through a Jeffries tube and continue to find Spock. Chris, you want to go next?
Thank you. So, um, see, as you said, she sees the tube, and she knows the Gorn will not follow her there. And I just want to say the Gorn looks incredible, and we're going to get more about that in a moment, because they dislike the cold, and see, even if he were to notice her, he would likely not pursue up a frigid Jeffries tube. So, meanwhile, while this is going on back on the planet, um, Pike decides that he's going to single-handedly try to rescue everyone, and he's trying to sneak out when Patel says, "You're trying to go save all of us, aren't you?" And he's like, "Yeah." It's like, "What's your plan?" And he's like, "Well, I'm just going to." Mr. Scott said that he had a transponder that he made, so I'm going to try and get that transponder, put it in our shuttle, and like fly people out. And she's like, "You can't fit everyone in this shuttle." And he's like, "If we can just get some people out of here, that's a victory." And they're going back and forth. And then Montgomery Scott pops up and says, "Hey, you're not going to be able to get that out of the shuttle without my help because it fused in there. And sorry to overhear you all, but you did have your secret conversation right where I sleep." And so Pike says, "Do you want to come with us?" And he says, "No, I'm terrified, but I ordered to the crew of the Stardiver, and if we go through the back alleys, maybe we can make it." And Spike tosses him his hand phase and says, like, "You're coming along for the ride." And meanwhile, the image shifts again, and we see that Spock has just successfully placed the last booster rocket on the bridge, or what remains of the bridge, of the Cayuga, and he activates it, and then he sees a reflection of a tail, a massive tail, dropping behind him, and he realizes there's a Gorn behind him. And so he reaches for his phaser, turns around, he wants to shoot the Gorn. The Gorn knocks the phaser out of his hand with its tail, and the Gorn looks, this is an adult Gorn. And you understand now why Lahan kept on saying, if we allow these younglings to become adults, we do not have a chance, because it's huge, it's gigantic. And at that moment, Nurse Chapel makes her way onto the bridge, and she sees what's going on. Spock sees her and is relieved, and then also terrified, like, I could really lose her now again. And so the Gorn knocks each one aside with his tail, And Spock, because let's not forget he's a Vulcan, so he has strength much greater than a human, he charges the Gorn and successfully manages for a brief moment to pin down the Gorn against the bulkhead, while Nurse Chapel is trying to make her way to the phaser. And it's the best slow motion in space fight that I've seen in a long time. I see is desperately like trying to reach the phaser, and Spock has got the Gorn pinned down, but then the Gorn wraps its presentile tail around his neck and takes its massive paw and puts it on the glass of his helmet and is trying to crack it at the same time as he's choking him. And so they're struggling. And Spock wasn't a Vulcan. This fight would have been long over. And it looks like Chapel is just not going to make it to the phaser. And you can sort of start to hear the face mask of Spock crack. And then with one last lunge, anchoring herself to like what's left of a rail, she manages to get the hand phaser, turns around and fires, does not hit Spock, hits the Gorn. The Gorn releases its grip on Spock. It's not a death shot, but it's wounded or at least caught its attention. And Spock takes advantage of that because again, with his Vulcan strength, he yanks out a piece of metal from the railing, turns around, grabs the tail with one hand. Gorn turns around to see what's going on and just stabs through the face mask of the Gorn, which, as powerful and strong and deadly as it is, it still needs air to live. And it begins to convulse around in space until it finally just like dies. Um, and at that point, Spock and Chapel get together, and you see them begin to float upwards out of the saucer section as the saucer section, guided by the rockets, begins to go down. Meanwhile, in the midst of all of this, um, Anson Mount's character, along with Scotty and Patel, have made it to a shuttle, and they're trying to pry loose the transponder when they realize, oh crap, there's a Gorn in the shuttle, a baby Gorn. And Pike doesn't have his phaser because he gave it to Montgomery Scott, and he's left his rifle just out of reach. And surprised, Patel puts herself in between them and the baby Gorn, and the baby Gorn gets like really close and then leaves. And Pike is like, wait a minute here. And so while Scotty is still trying to pry loose the transponder, Pike gets her to admit that C has been infected. And she shows him his arm and says, it happened yesterday. The infestation period is a day and a half. And Patel is saying, listen, this is what's going to happen. We're going to take that transponder. We're going to put it on your shuttle. And I'm going to fly that shuttle direct into that tower. I'm going to knock it out. Then Enterprise is going to beam everyone out of here. And Pike, of course, is like, no, I'm not going to lose you. I came here for you. You got to give us a chance to help you. And she's like, no, this is what Hemmer did. Yet another reminder of Hemmer. This is what Hemmer did. And, he was right. And I'm not going to sacrifice anyone here for me. And he's like, Hemmer was brave, but he didn't give us a chance. Please give me a chance. And at that point, Scotty says, I hate to interrupt again, but you better grab a hold of something. And we see the saucer section of the Cayuga just coming down to the tower. And bang! It takes out the tower. And then aboard Enterprise, you see all of a sudden the sensors and everything is back up around the Parnassus. And they beam Chapel and Spock from space. They beam up direct to sickbay. Patel, Scotty, and Pike. And you see all the colonists are getting together in one space, and you see them beamed out, but it's a green residue. Josh, do you want to take us home?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So, back aboard the Enterprise, the Enterprise is suddenly attacked by 4 Gorn ships, and Pike is not going to go out there till they beamed out the crew. And suddenly, Spock detects that there is no human life signs on the planet, but there is residual traces of a transporter beam, but it's a Gorn transporter beam. Apparently, the Gorn have beamed the remaining survivors, and along with Erica, Joseph, Luan, and whoever else was left in there.
Sam Kirk. Sam Kirk.
Sam Kirk, right. Have all been beamed into the Gorn ship. And meanwhile, Patel has been put into stasis to keep the Gorn from gestating in her body. So, till they can get those removed. So, we've got all that going on. And Una is asking Pike for orders, what they need to do. Pike, the camera pans to Pike's face. He's looking very intense, trying to figure out what to do. Do we save the Enterprise, or do we try to go after one of the Gorn ships that might have the crew and the survivors? And then the screen goes black and the words "to be continued." And so that is where season 2 of Star Trek Strange New Worlds comes to an end. And right up there with a cliffhanger that has not been this intense probably since, like Chris said, Best of Both Worlds way back in 1990. So, you know, what are we going to do? How are we going to save our crew? Well, we're going to have to wait till next year to find out, but we'll have some theories that we're going to go
Oh,
into very shortly, aren't we, Chris?
to 2025 even.
Yes. So if everybody's got time, please go back and rewatch the first 2 seasons of Strange New Worlds to keep yourselves occupied till we get this writers and actors strike settled. And yeah, so I guess it's gonna be a while. So we're gonna have to be very patient.
Pay the actors, pay the writers.
Yes.
Stop paying yourself like multi-million-dollar bonuses. Like pay the people whose work you benefit from.
Yes. Pay the workers. Power to the people here, people.
So I thought this was brilliant, Josh. I'm just going to start out with the good, because they could have easily taken the way out of like, okay, we beam everyone out and then we're hightailing it out of here. Everything's fine. Yeah. And no, they chose the least traveled path with multiple cliffhangers. What's going to happen to Patel? Are they going to be able to stop the infestation of the Gorn babies inside her? Like, what's going to happen to the away party? Like, did Joseph bring with him some Proposition 12? Are we at war with the Gorn officially? What the heck is Pike going to do? Because that final look is so fantastic when Una's saying, "Orders, Captain," and you can just see that he has no idea what he's going to do next because he's left with no choice. Either obey Starfleet Admiral April's orders and withdraw immediately and leave his people behind, or risk the entire Enterprise trying to fight a multitude of Gorn ships on his own just to get the crew back. Will they be able to use the information about the solar flares to their advantage? Like, will Scotty and Pelia figure out how to recreate the transponder, but at a level that it can actually encompass the entire Enterprise? So many cliffhangers.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead with my good Scotty. Honestly, I was so happy because we were talking about this before we started the show, how much like an MCU thing this was. Like, we had no idea he was going to show up this season or in this episode, and then he just he pops in, and it made perfect sense that he would be there at this point because just when you needed a medical worker, well, our favorite our favorite Scotsman showed up for the day, and I just want to say that this is the big breakout role for one Mr. Martin Quinn, who has previously done a few indie films and done voiceover work on video games. But this is his big breakout part here, and I thought he was really good in this. I thought he did a great job. I think he captured the spirit of Simon Pegg and Jimmy Doohan very well in his performance. What do you think, Chris?
I love the fact that they kept this so tightly under wraps. As I may have mentioned to you before, Josh, like I was a little upset because in the previews it shows that Patel survives whatever attack because you see her embracing Pike, saying like, Chris, you found us. So I was a little miffed at that going into the episode, thinking, how could they reveal that to us? Oh no, smoke and mirrors. If you distract people with what's happening here, they're not going to see what's happening here. And what's happening here is the introduction of one Montgomery Scott, which is mirroring something we saw last season, introduction of Kirk in the final episode. So now they're giving us another TOS original at the end of this season. I'm not sure if it's meant to be like at the end of every season, they're going to give us one TOS appearance. But it certainly made sense to have Scotty here, introduce him this way. And it was just typical Scotty. Like, yeah, I jury rigged the engines to get more of it than I should have. Like, yeah, when there's an armada of like human eating lizards coming upon me, I get really creative and I can just create this transponder. Um, so it was a nice introduction. I'll talk a little bit later in the Gorn about whether I think we should see him regularly or not. I have some thoughts on that. Um, the other thing I thought that was good was I'm wearing my shirt here, expendable, because the minute that the colonists on Parnassus Beta did not join the Federation, they all became expendable. What were they thinking? They thought because they were members of the Federation, they would get attacked. No, you're going to get attacked because you're not part of the Federation. And clearly, this is what happened with the Gorn, and it makes sense. The Gorn are not going to be the ones to, at least initially, start an all out war. So they're just going to push and push and push. And so they were prime candidates here, and it makes sense that this happened.
Yes. Well, just to clarify for folks who have not watched the episode yet, or these were human colonists, and but clearly they were living outside the Federation and weren't sure they wanted to maintain their Federation citizenship or just go off and be an independent colony and live on their own. But clearly they were, trying to get the advantages of, Starfleet coming in and, giving them vaccination, helping them with their crops. But yeah, that's the thing is when you're part of something bigger like the Federation, you tend to, people know it and they tend to, okay, we don't want to hork off Starfleet in some way, so maybe leave you alone. It's kind of like, you know, why the Russians have never tried to occupy Alaska or Hawaii in the last 70 years. It's because they're part of they're American states. So yeah, so there's that.
I also really like, Josh, the fact that since we saw the Gorn, the Federation has not just been like, okay, it's the Gorn. No, they've been at work and they created new weapons capable of taking on the Gorn. And
Yeah.
we saw enhanced phaser rifles, enhanced tricorders can now detect the Gorn. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they learned. I really wanted to see one of the nitrogen grenades at work. Maybe that'll be like season 3.
Yeah.
And I like that it's kept super secret so that Gorn can't find out, and it needs a special clearance code from Captain Pike to even access the weapons, but that every ship has these. Clearly, the Cayuga didn't have enough time to beam these down to Patel. But yeah, I like the fact that Starfleet hasn't exactly just stood still, like hoping for the best. Like they actually are preparing for the worst.
Yeah, I think that um, after the events of last season and earlier this year, I think they've been trying to get ready for the inevitable Gorn conflict that they had to know was coming. And they have not just been sitting around and just hoping for the best. I think that they've learned some lessons, both from the Enterprise's encounters with the Gorn and also from the Klingon War. That they are a little bit more prepared. Not everybody is happy feely kind of people.
Josh,
Out
what's the
there.
difference between a Klingon and a Gorn?
What is the difference, Chris?
Difference is the Klingons just want to beat us. The Gorn, they want to eat us.
Yes, the Gorn are quite cannibalistic of other life forms. But you know what else is the difference?
What else?
Klingons wear Gorn.
Klingons were Gorn. Very
Yes,
true.
that's what we make our clothes out of.
That's very true.
Yeah. So yeah, there's that, and
Let's talk, Josh. Let's talk a minute about how beautifully choreographed the zero-G fight scene in the remains of the bridge was.
oh
I love that.
yeah, that was I was on pins and needles on that one. That was really exciting, and they did such great wire work and blue screen work with all of that. I think that it's nice to know that yeah, there's a little bit more money involved in modern Trek because yeah, you can do wire work that you could not imagine doing on TOS back in the day. Yeah, because I mean, yeah, there are instances it's in space. So sometimes, we forget. Yeah, there's no gravity in space. Well, I mean, there's gravity, but not enough that keeps you from floating in different directions. So, uh, but yeah, that was wonderful.
I
And
mean, the adult Gorn, and Laan was right. They would not have stood a chance if the hatchlings had grown into at least one full grown Gorn last season. I mean, it looked fantastic.
it was, and you're seeing it in the spacesuit and with the tail. Um, which does beg the interesting question, and I have a theory I want to pitch to you right now about why the original Gorn in TOS did not have a tail.
Pitch me that in the Gorn section because I want
Yeah,
to talk about that and what it means to about canon. So let's talk about that in the Gorn section.
yeah, okay. All right, so you want to move to the bad now,
Um,
or we
sure.
got one more, or do you have another good we want to throw up?
No, no. Let's move on to the bad.
Okay.
Which is how on earth could Admiral April think they're not at war with the Gorn? I mean,
Yeah.
the Gorn destroyed a Federation starship. I mean, they just completely killed it, the entire crew. Even if the colonists are not part of the Federation, that ship is, and they destroyed it. So, do you think the Klingons would put up with one of their ships being destroyed? There'd be an
Oh,
entire armada heading there right now. So, the fact that they're ordering an immediate withdrawal and saying they don't want to provoke a war, I got news. The war has already started.
exactly. The Klingons would have gone straight into full war mode and would have started attacking any planet that the Gorn were occupying. Gorn ships would have been just getting shot down with overwhelming force. Um, One bad thing I'm going to bring up, and this was something I was talking about with my friend Mary Fan. Um, when Chapel wakes up on the remains of the Cayuga, um, why is it that she doesn't look for survivors? Why is it like, we couldn't have just had, and if they didn't want to have any other survivors, that's fine. They could have just had Chapel ask computer, are there any other survivors on the Cayuga? And the ship could have just said negative. No other life forms on board the Cayuga. Or even just said no other crew members have survived or something like that. Um, that just to say, okay, that just to take care of that part. It just seems like, oh, we didn't care. Or even if they could have just like spent a little more money and just had a couple more extras to, play Cayuga survivors and put on spacesuits and help out. But yeah, I mean, they just need to do that. That was kind of irksome. Some people might not have noticed that, but I think that there were a few people that did. So
So,
there was that. Yeah, go ahead.
mine also involves Chapel, but it's a different side to this argument, which is like when they're having the beautifully choreographed, once again, fight in the remains of the bridge. She shoots the gun just once. I would have emptied the entire phaser clip on it. I would not have stopped shooting until that thing is so red hot I have to drop it.
Yeah, I mean, or chalk it up to I think level 12 on that phaser on that particular model and disintegrate that bad boy.
That's exactly right. I mean,
Just make
one
sure that thing
shot.
doesn't exist.
I mean,
Michael, sorry, go ahead.
um, no, it's good. Oh, big hi to a friend of the show, Michael Payette. Nice to see you, Michael. Hello. Yeah, I would have emptied the entire clip at the Gorn.
Yeah, definitely. Michael asks a couple of questions here. How did the sensors miss her life size? Well, I think Michael, the reason for that was because the Gorn dampening field that they were using, um, it masked all the sensors. That's why they couldn't detect lifetimes on the planet. So there was that. He also asked, why is Spock more emotional than Chapel? Well, I think Chapel has had a lot of trauma from the events of the Klingon War with the Federation. So it's quite possible she's just better at, maybe she's just, hiding her emotions more. Also, Spock, experimenting more with emotions at this point in his life. might just be kind of, it might be a maturity issue for that. But I don't know. It's not. I don't know.
I mean,
Uh,
I would say that yes, that's in this instance, Chapel is being a little bit more Vulcan than Spock, and that Spock himself has emotions and they're so strong and they're coming out, and he still hasn't learned how to control them that well. In a way, Chapel learns because of learned from the Klingon War how to mask her emotions and push them back better than Spock. And let's not forget Spock has emotions too, and they're much stronger perhaps than a human. But I think
yeah,
yeah, I agree with that.
yeah. Has stated, Vulcans have very intense emotions, and they go through years of rigorous emotional discipline in order to hold them in check. It's not that they don't have emotions; it's just they're trying to they just are used to tapping them down. And Spock has chosen, because of his relationship with Chapel and also because of his interactions on the Enterprise, to try to let some of that emotion out. Um, at this point in his life, even though he knows he needs to be the dispassionate, logical scientist if he can be of the best advantage to his friends and Starfleet. But um, let's see, I had one other. The As far as other bad, I don't know. I think I had one or two, but I think I forgot to write them down. But that the Chapel and other survivors of the Cayuga was kind of the big thing with me. Chris, is there anything else there that
You
you
know
could
me,
think of?
Josh. Usually I'm the first one to start nitpicking things, but I gotta say, aside from like emptying the clip on the Gorn, I thought the episode was brilliant. I loved it. I dare say I think it was the best episode of the entire series.
Yeah, it was a high note to walk away from. Oh, we just got a message from Stress Free K. Howdy, y'all. Just wanted to note that Amanda, that's Spock's mom, referred to Spock as an adolescent.
Quite true.
Well, yeah, I mean, Vulcans do have a lifespan of over 205 average years. So, yeah, I guess he would still technically be in his late teens. So he's still in Vulcan puberty for all intents and purposes.
Struggling with his Vulcan emotions. Good point.
Yeah. So, as Picard once said to Worf in the movie Star Trek Insurrection, if you're feeling any aggressive emotions, be sure to let me know. Uh, and we thank you, Stress Free, for and Michael, for chiming in with your comments. Please do keep them coming. We enjoy hearing from you. So shall we move into the Gorn now?
I believe so.
Okay. So
So I
sorry, go
want to
ahead.
I want to tackle the issue of the tail, and let's
Hmm.
start off with when we were first introduced to the Gorn.
Hmm.
You can see it
Yes.
here, homage,
Uh-huh.
no
Oh,
tail.
nice.
Thank you, thank you. These are extremely hard to come by for anyone wondering like where I can find one of these. So I also watched last night the episode of Enterprise where we see the only other time since TOS a Gorn, and the Gorn again has like this leotard like primitive look to it. It looks a
Hmm.
little bit more like the reptile that we saw now. Not as good. Again, it's like 2003 or whatever. Um, and now we get to today, where we see a formidable looking Gorn with a tail and technologically quite adept. And so we may look back at this and say, wait a minute, canon says they're not supposed to have a tail. Canon needs to evolve. We cannot be slaves to canon. When they made these original episodes back in the 60s, they had no idea something may come out of it decades later. They thought this is it. We move on to the next episode. No one's going to even remember this. Nowadays, I think writers and producers they plan a little bit better for the future, like what might come next. Back then, they thought there was no next. So while I would understand if there's some people who start to point out, girl, there was no tail in the original Gorn, being slave to canon is a bad thing. And there's one thing that I really like about Strange New Worlds is that it's evolving canon, that it's pushing the boundaries and beginning to make some changes here and there. And I think that's good. I equivalent being beholden to canon as like one of these historic preservationists that you've seen some neighborhoods saying you can't put in um, double or triple windows because they never had those back in colonial times. They only had like the simple glass. I'm like, no. I mean, you know, evolve with the times. Like no one, except maybe in Amish country, has a buggy and a horse. We all have cars now because you need to methods of transportation evolve. Canon needs to evolve and grow, and that's the way it'll become maintain itself healthy and be sustainable for the lifeblood of a series. Like, don't be you can't drive a car looking into the past.
Yeah, well, on the subject of horse and buggies, if gas prices keep going the way they are, I may just invest in a horse and buggy. But on the
Fair
subject
enough.
of the Gorn with the tailless Gorn, I have a theory. I have a theory. That Gorn clearly got into a fight with the Klingon, and the Klingon cut its tail off and made boots out of it.
I think you might be right.
Yeah, could be. I think, in fact, Alex Kurtzman, I know you're watching this today, buddy. Alex, you need to get some of those writers when the strike is over. You need to write an episode where we see a Klingon cut a Gorn's tail off, and that's the Gorn that Captain Kirk later went on to fight. So, Alex, make it happen, buddy. We're just saying, okay?
I think the other part of what's going to happen with this whole episode is are they going to be able to create a fake transponder? Like, yes. The
Mm-hmm.
question moving forward is should Scotty stay or should Scotty go? I think Scotty should maybe be in Enterprise for one or two episodes, but ultimately, I think he should transfer to the Farragut because I think it makes sense that when James Kirk 5 years from now takes command of the Enterprise, he would bring along some of the people he's familiar or comfortable working with. And so it would make it absolute sense this way that he would bring a Montgomery Scott and he would become promoted to chief engineer, arriving with Kirk. So I think that great that we see Scotty maybe having a couple of episodes next season, but ultimately I think he should transfer out to prep the way for him to transfer back permanently.
I would, yeah. I mean, okay, like if we want to have Paul Wesley come in an episode next season to visit the Enterprise again, which seems to be coming on there a lot.
Yeah, they do seem to be trying
Yeah,
to force feed us Kirk.
yeah, that is something. Although I will admit, hey, I'm getting quite used to Paul Wesley's interpretation of the character. I think it's a real testament not just to William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, but just in general how well these characters are. That they are now up there with the mythical proportions of great characters like Hamlet and Arthur Loomis, or yeah, Willie Loomis and other great characters that we've seen in theater and movies. Um, that you have other actors who come in and play them and are not just playing them as parodies of what the other actors of what Nimoy and Shatner did before, but are now bringing their own interpretations. Um, and the same goes with Martin Quinn here. That I think that yeah, I mean, I would be okay if like they kept him aboard and he's training on Apelia to become the Enterprise's new chief engineer, which we know ultimately he will, or maybe he ends up on the Farragut serving with Kirk, and then Kirk brings him back to the Enterprise with him. I'm sorry, special stress free K mentioned. I wouldn't mind Strange New Worlds to transition to Star Trek continuous format eventually. Well, yeah, but I think before we get to that, I think we're going to go to TOS, them old scientists. Chris.
It's an issue of screen time. Like, obviously, Nurse Chapel is going to have to lose some screen time next season if she's going to be under her apprenticeship with Dr. Corby. So maybe you plug that in with a Montgomery Scott. Um, but it's an issue of how much screen time you can give to an already large cast. And so adding one more person on a permanent basis, I don't think would quite work. Um, unless we lose someone else here. Let's not forget, like Laan. I mean, we know Mabenga's got to survive. We
Mhm.
know Sam Kirk's got to survive. Like, we don't know if Laan could
Yeah.
survive this one. Um, I am very intrigued what would happen in season three with PTSD of like, oh my god, especially if they end up in a breeding planet again. Like, here I am again. Um, and you know, are the Gorn capable? I mean, there's so many questions, right? Like, are the Gorn capable of when they transported them on? Which I noticed, by the way, it was the transporter color green. I was like, something's wrong here. Um, uh, and so, if you look back at comments, that was done on purpose because yellow is more the Federation color. Um, is it going to be? Are they managed to filter out the weapons when they beam them aboard their ship so that they arrive and they have no weapons? Do they have some weapons and perhaps a healthy dose, some healthy vials of Proposition 12 to, like, fight their way through the ship? I mean, there's just so many questions regarding not only what happens with Pike, even if he withdraws. I'm sure the Admiralty is going to have some questions of him, or like, why did you, like, interfere when we told you specifically not to interfere? Um, so many questions of what's going to happen not only with Pike but also with the people who were beamed aboard the Golden warship.
Yeah, and I think with regards to the Protocol 12, which of course, quick reminder for everybody, is the kind of temporary super soldier formula that Mbenga developed some years ago, and that he did use to kill several Klingons during the Klingon War. Um,
Most
I,
confirmed hand-to-hand combat kills.
yes, definitely, and I have to wonder, okay, yeah, I'm sure Mbenga probably did bring some along with him just in case, knowing that, he was going in there. And I've been wondering though, and I was talking with Mary about this, was what would happen if Luan took it? Now, we know she is a descendant of Khan Noonien Singh, and as far as we've never seen her display any above average strength and speed, but could Protocol 12 activate some latent genetic enhancements that we've never seen before, and
Very
could
possible.
enable her to be more of a threat to the Gorn, that would make her more than capable of killing several Gorn with her bare hands.
Very possible. But in the midst of all of this, Gorn section, I want to bring up the be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. Because remember, Ortegas was really upset when she didn't get to go down the landing party. And like her thing has been like, I
Mm-hmm.
never get to go down on landing parties.
Mm-hmm.
After this, she should be like, I never want to go on another landing party again.
This is true. Another thing about Ortega I want to bring up here, if we recall back to the crossover episodes with Lower Decks, Boimler let it slip that Ortega is a war hero. Now, not talking about the Klingon War, because we know she was a veteran of that, but if she's a war hero, that means she had to have been given some sort of honors, maybe not during the Klingon War, but maybe during the Gorn War.
Well, and I also might remind everyone that in addition to Laan, we don't know for sure Ortegas makes it.
Yeah, we don't. We do know Mbanga will make it
Yeah,
because he did appear in an episode of Them Old Scientists,
he appeared in two
TOS.
episodes.
Hmm,
Two
two
episodes
episodes.
of TOS, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was two. Okay. Um,
One is a barely count, and you'll see it where he shows up to Spock's bed and says, like, yeah, you Vulcans are like, you recover well, and then you never see him again. But yeah, it's two.
yes. The episode Private Little War, and what was the other one, Chris?
I don't recall. I'm looking at a comment now from Stress Free, and she's absolutely right when she says, just imagine Una with a dose of Protocol 12 tangling with the Gorn.
Yeah, that would be one dead Gorn.
That would be one dead Gorn. I mean, I think what we need here, if we do have a war with the Gorn, is you need to enact an early version of the Cisco protocols, which means to trick the Klingons into entering into a fight with the Gorn.
Yes. Those of you do not remember, we're of course talking about the episode from Deep Space Nine, by the pale moonlight, which Cisco with the help of Garrick, manages to trick the Romulans into joining the Dominion War on the side of the Federation and the Klingons. So, yeah, that would be very, very helpful to kind of have at least a temporary alliance.
I mean, I
With,
think at the end, the solo flares will prove to be the key here. Whether it be that they figure like, hey, they have the locust mentality, as Sam Kirk mentioned, and say, listen, if you don't give us back our people, we're going to trigger a mass coronal effect that's going to make all of you just launch yourselves uncontrollably into the sun.
yeah, I mean I think that there are no coincidences in this sort of thing. I think that yeah, Scotty's reference to the solar flares or coronal ejections, actually, as they're actually described, um, could play a factor here somehow involving the Gorn. So that does remain to be seen what's going to happen. And you are right, as we have seen that Gorn space does, you know, come very close with the Klingons and the Federation. So, yeah, how are we to know that the Gorn have not attempted to attack the Klingons? That which again could antagonize the Klingons enough to make them want to go start, going after them like those guys on that show that go after all them gators. You know what I'm talking about?
Joss, and one last question about our Gorn section. Do you think to the Gorn we taste like chicken?
I think we taste like chicken to the Gorn.
I think so.
I think we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but to the Klingons, what did the Gorn taste like?
Steak.
Steak.
They
Yum.
want their idea of a great meal is a Gorn strip with blood wine.
Yes, definitely. That sounds delicious. I
Yes.
like that idea a lot.
Rare, of course.
Very rare.
Very rare.
Yeah. So, okay.
So,
I think
Josh,
yes.
overall grade for season 2 of Strange New Worlds?
I'm giving it an A plus.
A plus as well.
Yes, I love this show. I think right now, I think my top two favorite Star Trek shows of modern Trek are definitely Strange New Worlds and Lower Decks. I'm very sad about this. We've talked about this. My frustrations about why Paramount Plus shuttled off Prodigy, because I think that show had really hit its stride after the first 4 episodes, and of course, we've had the finale with Star Trek Picard, and we are coming close to the end of Discovery, which we've had somewhat mixed feelings. I mean, I think I've liked Discovery, but it has been a show that had a lot of problems. And but yeah, I think that definitely Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds have been Trek at its truest. And
There are still Gorn in Discovery.
yes, the Gorn have been mentioned
Yes.
quite a bit. So
They destroyed the subspace communication system.
they did, those bastards. And yeah, we're gonna have to have a talk with them about that. So it is interesting though that the Gorn seem to show up when you least expect them. Um,
I think the usage of the Gorn has been brilliant. I think it's like, the less you use something, the more impact it has when you finally show them.
yeah,
And, you know, we have had to sacrifice some things in season 2. Like, we have not seen Captain Angel and Cybok.
no, we did not get to see them. That is kind of a letdown.
But you only have 10 episodes, and you can only put in so
Yep.
much without it becoming too much of a hodgepodge of distraction. So everything has been sort of leading us, especially I've loved the development of the Pike Patel relationship, because I think it shows that two working captains can have a working relationship, which somewhat models a lot of the questions that we have in modern times with like couples who have like two high powered jobs. Can you have this? And I think the answer, with difficulty, yes. Kind of like Ad Astrum, to the stars with difficulty, to have a relationship with difficulty, but you can do it. So I've loved the evolution of the relationship throughout the season, leading up to this point that we actually do care. Like, holy crap, what's going to happen with Patel? Because again, much like with Ortega, Solan, there's no record of a Patel. But again, that doesn't mean there can't be, because just because Cannon said there's no mention means that you can't have a mention later on.
Right. I mean, and I kind of, I think I've talked with you about this, and I've talked with other friends about this. Is that it would be helpful if we had some flash forward episodes in the future, maybe in season 5, where we kind of
Okay.
fill in some blanks on Spock's life, on the lives of several characters, between where we know they end up and where. And so one of them I've kind of thought about is, wouldn't it be interesting if, okay, maybe Patel's alive, she continued to have this long relationship with Pike, and maybe she was helping Spock behind the scenes in the episode The Menagerie, in which Spock steals the Enterprise in order to take Pike back to Talos 4, where we know that he lived out the remainder of his life.
But
With
again,
Yeah,
this again goes to canon. That do we at the and it's too early to answer this question, but at the end of Strange New Worlds, does it? We know someone has to, like, be in that chair. Does it have to be Pike? I think this is a question that we will wrestle with as we go on into further seasons. But just because canon said it was him, I don't think necessarily it has to be him. It just has to be someone to fulfill that
I
requirement, and so that
yeah. Well, I
Kirk
think
can command the Enterprise for the incident with the Romulans.
yeah, I think that Pike is going to ultimately end up in the chair.
I don't
Uh,
think so.
well,
I
I
don't think so.
well,
I don't
I
think so.
they said he can't avoid his destiny, and because of the events we saw at season finale last year, he no longer is even trying to do that. He is going to face his destiny, because he knows his destiny is going to lead to Spock changing the face of the galaxy, and because of his significance in
I,
bringing about the Federation Klingon alliance, and then later reunifying the Romulans and the Vulcans.
I think at the end of the day, what we'll see in season 6 or 7, we will see Una will end up somehow in that accident, and then Pike will just accept becoming an admiral and letting Kirk command the Enterprise. And we will see, much like you mentioned, who is it? Someone's advising Spock. We will see that all along it's Pike who allowed Kirk to keep on doing all the shit he should have been punished for at one time or another. We will learn that behind the scenes in the Admiralty, it was Pike all along who was saying, like, no, put up with him. No, put up with him. No, put up with him.
Well,
That's my
there's only one
prediction.
way to find out, everybody, and that
It's
is to continue to watch Strange New Worlds after the writer and actor strikes have been resolved.
Absolutely, because that is the one thing that is the justification for what has sadly happened with Prodigy, that they're saying not enough people were watching. So we don't want a repeat of that. So continue watching Strange New Worlds, like, stream it in the off season even more,
Yeah.
so that we can continue to have this. And hopefully next season, perhaps see what happens with the Captain Angel and a Cybok. Learn what happens with Patel. But this is a
Yes.
fantastic show. Keep on watching it. Be patient. For those of you who watch Outlander, this might be like a Droughtlander in the fact that they had just started filming in May. We may not have a new season until the start of 25.
Yeah, and the same thing with Deadpool 3, which would be the first Deadpool movie that would actually be 100% in the MCU. And it may be, we don't get that till late 2024, early 2025, unfortunately. But you know what? As Captain Picard once said a long time ago, if the cause be just and honorable, then we must be prepared to walk the strike line. And I
I'm
don't
not
know
sure you
if
said it
anybody's.
that way, but I'm going to buy it. I'll buy into that.
Yes. Okay. And just in case anybody was wondering, this week photos surfaced of Ethan Peck and
Jack Quaid.
Jack Quaid on the strike line, and Jerry Ryan and guy who played Captain Shaw. Um,
We know who you're
well,
talking about.
yes, both captains Seven and Shaw were also on the strike line this week too. So, folks,
Todd Stanswick.
hmm?
Todd Stanswick.
Todd Stanwyck, we're out there, and so please support the writers. Please support the strikers. And before we go, special, just keep a thought for the people of Maui. Um,
Yeah.
if you were thinking of as Jason Momoa and other actors who are from the Hawaiian region have asked people, please don't go on vacation right now in Hawaii. But if you can, please donate your money to help the survivors. Um, it's time to come together again as Americans and help our fellow Americans who are in great distress right now because of this terrible tragedy. So,
And if you were thinking about going to Maui, hold off 2 or 3 years, but then go, because we cannot only remember them in their time of need now, but for recovery to be sustainable, they will need tourists going back in 2 or 3 years. So if you're thinking about going there now, please hold off, but don't not go. Like in 2 or 3 years, to
yes.
ensure that the recovery is sustainable, please think of going there, because they need the boost now, and then they will need the boost then.
Yeah. And on that note, I think we're ready to bring this season back into space dock.
We are.
And,
Thank you
but
to Michael and to Stress Free. And yes, I agree, Stress Free, that I also like the idea that we don't necessarily see Pike in the beep beep chair.
yeah. So with that done, we will be back, or um, we will be back later. I think in September. Or Chris, will you be joining me for the lowdown on lower decks?
I believe so, but maybe not the first episode, because the first episode is the weekend of Baltimore Comic Con.
Ah,
And so I
yes.
will be away at Baltimore Comic Con.
Yeah.
But after that, I believe yes.
Yeah, and I too will. But I will be here opening up the show, and I might have a surprise guest joining me. So I will let you all know about that. And in the meantime, please like and subscribe to our friends at Movers and Shakers Unlimited, the wonderful people who make all this happen. And you know, I guess let's wrap this up. Chris, where can anybody find you?
Well, first I want to say, for our viewers out there who are in the DC area, keep your eyes open. End of the month, there's Chantilly Comic Con, which will have the voice behind Harrison Dula of Star Wars Rebels. And then the weekend of September 7th, 8th, 9th, we have triple cons going on at the same time. We will be having Nostalgia Con at the Hunt Valley. We'll be having Baltimore Comic Con in Baltimore. And we'll be having Small Press Expo in Rockville, Maryland. So that's going to be a busy weekend. And
Yep.
many of you who attend these, I'll try to be doing the trifecta myself. I'm not sure I'm going to pull it off, but so I look forward to seeing many of you there, which is again the weekend of Star Trek Lower Decks. And meanwhile, if you are at Otakon or the recently held MonkeyCon, feel free to go to my gram, Verde Cosplay. You might see yourself there.
Yes, and just a quick mention on NostalgiaCon. Emmy Award winner Henry Winkler, the Fonz himself, will be there. I had the pleasure of meeting him about 10 or 12 years ago. Wonderful man. He's very warm, very friendly. You'll love it. You can also find me at the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup group, either on our Facebook page or at meetup.org. And my books, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural, and The Adventures of Madison Brown, the Robot Repair Girls, are still available on Amazon and Kindle. And with that said, I am Josh Pritchett.
I am Chris Pavon and Michael Pera. Thank you. A reminder, many of you will be down at DragonCon in Atlanta as well. Peace and long life, my friends.
Live long and prosper, everybody. Bye-bye.